What comes to us from outside, and for that matter, everything that rises up from within, can only be made our own if we are capable of an inner amplitude equal to that of the incoming content. Real increase of personality means consciousness of an enlargement that flows from inner sources. Without psychic depth, we can never be adequately related to the magnitude of our object. C.G. Jung. Have you ever experienced a psychological rebirth? Most of us have at some point in our lives transformed in some way which we consider to be so complete that we might call it a rebirth. For me, this occurred when I quit drinking after 13 plus long years of alcoholism. The day I gave up alcohol for real was the beginning of a new era in my life. Of course, I didn't exactly know that in any precise moment. It simply revealed itself to me day after day as I continued to choose sobriety. The rebirth came in what followed. I was no longer avoiding myself and my problems. Instead, I was examining them, listening to them, learning from them. Of course, I didn't need alcohol to avoid facing these things. There are many ways we find to hide from ourselves. But I knew that the only way to be the person I wanted to be was to stop hiding. My entire worldview was altered when I quit drinking. It didn't happen all at once. It had been happening for a long time. But this act was the catalyst of change. It was the moment when the ideas about a better life left the theoretical space of my mind and became reality. It was the moment when my actions and behaviors began to align with my thoughts. This is not the only time in my life I have felt a sense of rebirth. We often encounter small-scale rebirths again and again as we grow older and gain more experience and understanding of what life means to us. But there are only two big, resounding rebirths which stand out in my mind: when I quit drinking and when my best friend died. When I quit drinking, I gained something, and that something was myself. When my best friend died, I lost something. I think rebirth is essential to personal development, and Carl Jung thought so too. He discusses rebirth in remarkable detail, breaking down the various forms the phenomena of rebirth can take. One of the most significant forms he talks about is enlargement of personality. This enlargement comes to us when we encounter the immortal wisdom which rests silently within the unconscious mind and choose not to run from it, but to allow it to be our teacher. When we encounter a revolt from within ourselves, whether it is spurred from outside events or internal ones, we have the capacity for extraordinary growth, but only if we are open to it. In order to be open to it, we must be willing to meet our shadow. So many of us refuse to meet the shadow. In addiction, it is impossible for some people to bring themselves to admit they have a problem. To admit that one has a problem requires an acknowledgement of and yielding to the unconscious shadow self by the ego. It requires us to let go of our illusions of control, and this is something that certain people are incapable of doing. There are far more addicts who never recover than there are those who do, and one of the reasons is this refusal to let go of control. As Jung says, but he must have within himself the capacity to grow. Otherwise, even the most difficult task is of no benefit to him. More likely, he will be shattered by it. And many a life is shattered by alcoholism and addiction. This is how my best friend died. So what's with all this talk about rebirth and our openness to it? As artists, we are seeking revelation. We are seeking rebirth in each and every piece we make. It is what drives our art. At least it should be if we hope to make anything more compelling than the vapid fodder which clogs our social media feeds and leaves us feeling as empty and depraved as the alcoholic waking suddenly from a restless slumber to the writhing panic of withdrawal. And there is one thing that will guarantee perpetual vacuity in our artistic endeavors: the refusal to meet the shadow self. The fear is that in affirming the existence of the shadow, we amplify its power. To the contrary, it is in avoiding the shadow that it gains influence over us. The alcoholic remains ruled by the shadow and the bottle it wields until the day she looks it in the eye. Only then can she break the spell. The journey into the darkness is one we must take if we wish to create any sense of depth in our personal and artistic lives. It is through this willingness to take in all aspects of the self, whether they be favorable or not, that we achieve the enlargement of personality Jung talks about. Without this, we are nothing more than empty vessels, and our art the same.